My name's Louisa, and I'm the lead real-time artist at AVR London, which is an architectural visualization studio. And at the studio, we've been on a journey for the last couple of years, and that has, I guess we kind of want to share some things that we've been through over the last period. So anyway, it's a little bit about the company. So technology is a huge part of our lives today. More and more often, we perceive the world through digital lenses. And these are our mobile phones, laptops, digital billboards, and so many others. And we're no stranger to these devices. Most of us are pretty confident with them, and they're almost like second nature now. With the advent of each one of these technologies, our lives change. So, film made us laugh and cry. Photographs made us remember, and the internet made us think. So every time a new one of these technologies is introduced, there is a new world of emotion and human connection that we can explore. And there is one in particular at the moment that's inspiring everybody's imaginations. And this technology is capable of accessing our emotional and physical states in much more complex ways than its technological predecessors. So this technology is virtual reality. I'm sure it's something that you've been hearing a lot about recently. And the press has had a very important role in increasing its profile. Every day, I don't know about you, but I'm hearing a lot of articles about ways that virtual reality can improve sort of stress and anxiety disorders, like I'm feeling right now. And also training astronauts, and I think there's so many other uses that people are writing articles about at the moment. So many people from different walks of life, professions and ages are beginning to hear about or experience virtual reality. This phenomenon is coming to somewhat of a critical mass. Now, you might ask yourself why that's important. What could it bring to us? And how is it different to what came before it? So, first of all, it's probably important that I mention that virtual reality is actually really old. The technology that we use today is inspired by stuff like Charles Wheatstone's stereoscopic viewer. And it works in a very similar way to our virtual reality today. It's just not got the computer or the digital screens to kind of accompany it. So a lot of Victorian people apparently used to wear these viewers. It's two side-by-side lenses and two side-by-side photographs, which our brains merge together and create a perception of depth. We've got an example of a woman in her living room. I don't know if you can see it very well, but she's having I think it's educational slides. So the very first virtual reality devices that we could really relate to what we use today were pretty monstrous. First, we've got the Sensorama, which is released in, I think, 1962. And that was a multi-sensory device. It was smell, touch, and sound, and obviously sight. And it was kind of virtual reality, but he actually used it to play films. And so we can't quite say that it's virtual reality. So the device that most people would consider as true virtual reality is Ivan Sutherland's Sword of Damocles. And he created a device that was actually almost identical to what we use today. So in a nutshell, it's a head-mounted display that's connected to a computer that's feeding it computer-generated images, and it's also got a head tracker so that when your head moves, the virtual environment updates depending on that position. And so this device actually inspired a lot of young people who were just about to graduate into the tech boom of the 1970s and 80s, like Thomas G. Zimmerman and Jaron Lanier, who actually coined the frame virtual reality. And it inspired them to start researching and to start progressing this new technology. Now, the next big sort of milestone that I'm going to talk about is the Virtual Boy. I don't know does anyone remember it? Yeah. Okay, well, I don't. I was 4, so I have no idea. But it was a really important step in sort of virtual reality history. The device was the first one to really bring virtual reality into people's living rooms and to sort of get more of a common knowledge about the device. And unfortunately, due to technical limitations, it wasn't the most successful, but it really did, without it, we wouldn't be able to do what we do now. Now in the present day, we're in a really fantastic place, and we have a world of opportunity, and we can really sort of take that back to 2012, when Palmer Luckey and team, they crowdfunded a virtual reality head-mounted device on Kickstarter, and that completely rebooted the virtual reality industries to what we have today. So now there are a lot of devices that are portable and affordable, and you can literally carry around on your person. And this triangle of usability and improved quality and portability means that the pieces of the puzzle are all finally fitting together. So if you ask 10 researchers what their sort of definition of virtual reality is, you'll probably got just as many answers and devices to use it on. So today I'm just going to talk about one device to keep things simple. This is the head-mounted display. That's the Oculus Vive Google Cardboard of the VR world. They're the freaky ones that people walk around and sort of wave their hands around. And so they're same as the device that I showed you before. They're head-tracked, and they provide quite accurate movement. They've got a high resolution, and they're able to deliver a very nice experience to the user. I'll just say before moving on to part two. So the people that came before us, like Zimmerman and Lanier, provided us with a wealth of knowledge to build upon and learn from. And we're now in a position where we can finally fulfill the dreams that they had when they started this journey. And it probably seems so far away from the technical limitations. Okay, but this departure from 2D media in the way that we're used to seeing it is being completely transformed. And we're now able to access all of these different sort of capacities that we weren't ever able to access before. Okay, so part two. So I want to talk to you a little bit about AVR and our journey with virtual reality. So AVR London has been researching virtual reality for 2 years now. And when we began, our first port of call was to try and achieve something as visually realistic as possible. And so to do that, we had the perfect test case. We chose a hotel lobby that we had modeled in 2D as a visualization a couple of years before. And that project had actually just finished going under construction. So we had a real-life version, our 2D rendered image, and we decided to create a fully interactive simulation of that environment. And you can see the results here. We created this sort of environment which the user could go around and explore in a virtual reality device. And the very interesting thing about this device is that when people started putting it on and experiencing it, we showcased it in an exhibition at an East Gallery, and we really weren't expecting what people said. They had this sort of, we thought that we'd made this really visually amazing piece, and all they could talk about was this essence of being somewhere completely different and transported, where all you wanted to do was touch, explore, and interact with the space around you. Now we started asking ourselves questions about this. What the big difference is between what we were doing before and this new technology that was giving us all these extra capabilities to evoke sort of this feeling in people. So to explain that a little bit, one too far. It's probably best to explain a little bit about how the technology works. And the way that I like to see it is to think of your visual receptors and your eyes as two different cameras in the world. So when we create virtual reality, we don't have two cameras that are duplicated. we have one here and one here, just like our own eyes. So the two cameras are slightly offset. And when you do that correctly, like the one on the left, you actually create a stereoscopic effect. It kind of converges the two images and creates a picture in your brain that gives the sort of presence of 3D depth. Okay, so one of the most important concepts in virtual reality is immersion. Now, to create immersion, you have to sort of fulfill several of these different aspects here. So one of those being fully stereoscopic, like I discussed in the previous slide. Having intuitive interactions, level of detail, and even having a believable sun position. And now once you've got all of these different pieces, you create a feeling of presence that's interlinked but not the same as immersion. And this presence is kind of the sense of being there, being in the space. And interestingly, when you add emotion to your design, you can evoke that feeling of presence and increase it, which in turn means that you're creating an environment that is more connected, that's deeper and more involved with the user. And therefore, you can give them an experience that they're going to remember. How could this improve the world that we live in? How could this idea of presence improve our world? In our world, we constantly experience spaces that evoke feelings. For me, the sort of one that conjures in my mind is the Sagrada Familia, Gaudi's church in Barcelona. I just remember as soon as I walked through the doors of the church, I was just taken aback, absolutely sort of flabbergasted by how grand the space was and, you know, all the colours around you. And I think that the idea of virtual reality really means that you could, before this stage, before it's actually built, you can go in there and try to use that to evoke emotions before you've actually designed it, so you can increase that sort of connection to the building. So there are so many ways that this could impact our world. I mean, imagine a world where 2D concepting is completely forgotten about. We concept everything in 3D, and we can experience this before it's made. Now, with this new way of designing, you can experience the world in a different way. You can design spaces to evoke certain emotions. For example, tranquility or calmness, or you can try and get some excitement in someone. If it's in an art gallery, for example, you can try and rile someone up for the experience. With our own eyes, we've also seen a change in the way that things are designed. Since we were doing these test cases, we've now sort of progressed onto working with live projects and live clients. And we've sat next to these architects who are designing the buildings and walking around the space in virtual reality whilst they're designing. Now, on a very simple level, they can improve stuff like floors. I mean, obviously, as soon as you see a floor in real life, if a door was fallen off something, you would notice instantly. So I guess the way that they sort of interact with floors and design faults is very, very much enhanced. But they also get a much, much deeper connection and understanding of the space. And they're able to use that to increase sort of sense of positive space and sort of, anything that might be claustrophobic. I mean, we've done some work with some very, very tight spaces. I can't mention too much, but shipping containers, trying to make them look really big so that people can, people feel good in the environment. Now, using a concept of it's the hierarchy of needs. I don't know who knows about that here. So this is actually a slide from Bo Cronin, who's a VR expert and computer scientist, and he explains this really well. So in the original hierarchy of needs, we have our sort of basic needs at the bottom. We've got food and sustenance, sleep, and then you build upon that sort of triangle. You've got safety above it, and then eventually, once you've climbed up, you have self-actualization and feelings of being able to be creative and be free in your environment. And so using that same concept, we have at the bottom, we have comfort, which is all of the technical aspects, like is the refresh rate high enough, is the graphics good enough, etc. So that's your base block. And once you've got this, you can move on to your interpretability. So that's for example, you know, have you ever been into a room that just doesn't work? I mean, if you experience that in virtual reality, you would know instantly, just as if you were in the real space in the real world, and you could then change that and make sure it's all working in the correct way. And then if you've got that, if it is working, you can actually find out if there's value to your design. And if there's not, you can increase that before you've finished concepting. And then the final part of our triangle, which is artistry. So at the final point, if you don't have that artistry and that connection from all of the bottom steps all the way up to the top, you can't get this delight that's going to make people want to come back to your experience. And if you can't do that, then this entire wave of new virtual reality is just going to dwindle out, just like the Virtual Boy. So really, this emotional connection is the thing that is making this is going to be the integral part of virtual reality and whether it works or not. Okay, but when we do that, the results are incredible. There are so many potentials that can be explored in virtual reality. I mean, imagine what it can do for your life personally. If you're a dentist, you can give a patient a virtual environment that's soothing to experience whilst they're having treatment. And then you might have nervous patients that can actually have treatments that they might not have been able to have before. If you're in marketing, you might be able to access a whole new world of people who then, you know, you can explain your product and how it applies to them, even from, you know, worlds away from them. There is one thing that's really connecting all of these things, and that's our want and need to express our feelings and emotions with others. And through this, we want to share our visions of the world with other people. What we really want to do is we want to give a new way of experiencing the world, one that is felt, created intentionally from the perspective of others, conveying our thoughts, feelings and expressions to one another through artistic media, whether it's a building, a piece of art, or a brand connecting with their customers. We want to provide a means of experiencing our world more vividly than ever before. Thank you.